We can edit this out, so it's fine. Personalities are a very interesting aspect of psychology because there are so many different personalities, different classifications, types of tests, and different ways to interpret them. Each person believes that they are unique, but today we can use science to prove it. I've always had a fascination with personality tests. My favorite type is called 16 personalities. I'm an ENFP, but that's the cool thing. There's so many other classification tests like the Myers-Briggs, the MMPI, the Big Five test, and completely other classifications like humanistic theories. All of these tests give you a glimpse into the different parts of a person's personality or mental health. Probably the most famous and well-known of personality tests, if not by name, but by the results of the test, is the Myers-Briggs Type Indicator. This is a test that promotes the 16 personalities theory, and is also the one a majority of the population uses when they do research on personality tests, or when a teenage girl wants to know what kind of personality they are to see if they're compatible with their crush. The other test in relation to this topic is 16personalities.com, which gives you a more simple and colorful classification of what category you fall under. The exact definition of this kind of test is, personality typing is a system of categorizing people according to their tendencies to think and act in a particular way. The 16 personality tests use personality typing attempts to find the broadest, most important ways in which people are different and make sense of these differences by sorting people into meaningful groups. The Myers-Briggs test is based on the work of psychologist Carl Jung. Myers and Briggs proposed that there are 4 key dimensions that could be used to categorize people: introversion versus extroversion, sensing versus intuition, thinking versus feeling, judging versus perceiving. Each of these dimensions attribute a letter in the personality type. There are 16 combinations of all of these dimensions. For example, my personality is ENFP, which means I'm extroverted, I use more of my intuition than senses, I use my feelings to solve problems, overthinking logically, and I perceive things rather than judge them. Based on this chart, like I said earlier, a teenage girl wanting to see if they're compatible with their crush, there are many other types of charts like this on the internet. For example, I'm Qui-Gon Jinn from Star Wars. And in a My Little Pony chart, I'm not a brony by the way, I'm Rarity. The MMPI is called the Minnesota Multiphasic Personality Inventory, and it is a psychological test that assesses personality traits and psychopathology. It is primarily intended to test people who are suspected of having mental health or other clinical issues. The MMPI is commonly administered in one of 2 forms: the MMPI-2, which is 567 true-false questions, and the newer MMPI-2-RF, which was published in 2008 and only has 338 true-false questions. The Minnesota Multiphasic Personality Inventory is considered a protected psychological instrument, meaning it can only be given and interpreted by a psychologist trained to do so, meaning you cannot find the test online. Trust me, I've tried to do so. While it's commonly administered by computer and requires no direct professional involvement during its administration, psychological training is usually preceded by a clinical interview by the psychologist who is doing the testing. After the computer scores the test results, the psychologist writes up a report interpreting the test results in the context of the person's history and current psychological concerns. The MMPI-2 is designated with 10 clinical scales, which assesses 10 major categories of abnormal human behavior, and 4 validity scales, which assesses the person's general test-taking attitude and whether they answered the items on the test in a truthful and accurate manner. I have personally not taken this test because I have not been required to take it by a psychologist. The Big Five test, also known as OCEAN, stands for openness, conscientiousness, extroversion, agreeableness, and neuroticism. It is another test similar to the previous 2, where you answer multiple choice questions and to see what percentage of each category you are. Low percentage means you're nearing the opposite dimension, where high percentage means you're right on line with the category. If you got a 20% in the extroversion category, it would mean you're more introverted in social situations than someone with 75%. Looking at the wrong chart here, because it says canoe instead of ocean, they should not call it that. Extroversion is one of the lines right here, and if the lower end of the scale, you're retiring, sober, and reserved, versus a high part of the scale, you'd be sociable, fun-loving, and affectionate. And this right here is what it would actually look like on a chart after you took the test. DISC is a behavioral assessment tool based on the DISC theory of psychologist William Moulton Marston, which centers on 4 different personality traits, which are currently dominance, influence, steadiness, and conscientiousness. The dominance states it is really about person places emphasis on accomplishing results, the bottom line, and confidence. Influence is about the person placing emphasis on influencing or persuading others, openness, relationships. Steadiness is about when the person places emphasis on cooperation, sincerity, dependability. And conscientiousness is when the person places emphasis on quality, accuracy, expertise, and competency. The DISC profile, published by Wiley, is a non-judgmental tool used for the discussion of people's behavioral differences. If you participate in the DISC program, you'll be asked to complete a series of questions that produce a detailed report about your personality and behavior. You'll also receive tips related to working with other people of other styles. This test allows people to increase their own self-knowledge, to find out what motivates them, what stresses them, and how you problem solve. If others take the test, you can learn how to best communicate with them. Often this is used in working in a team environment because the knowledge learned facilitates communication by recognizing the communication style of individuals. The thing that makes DISC different about other personality tests is that it's about relationships. Each of the profiles seek to show how we differ, but we can still work effectively together. These few tests that I've talked about all fall under the trait theory, which determines that everyone has different characteristics influenced by our genetics, like nature versus nurture. And this is the most well-known theory, which all of the stereotypical personality tests online are based off of. But there are 4 other personality theories: psychodynamic, psychoanalytic, humanistic, and social cognitive. As you can see here, each of them have a different person in relation. Under the psychoanalytic theory is the Rorschach test. No project about personality tests would be complete without this. The Rorschach test is where you are shown ink blob and you write down or say what you think the blob is, i.e. a butterfly, a ram horn, a monster, etc. This test is similar to the MMPI because, as it can help determine if you have a mental issue like anxiety or severe paranoia. There has been some controversy about the validity of this test, but it's still a staple of psychological tests. I am now going to play you this video about the Rorschach test so you can see how it works yourself. Sorry for the creepy music. In conclusion, personality tests can be a fun experiment to learn about yourself or want to know what character from The Lord of the Rings you are. However, many of these tests reveal knowledge about an individual's mental health or other psychological information. The information we get from these tests might not define the entire individual, but they most certainly give us some insight as to what is happening in their thoughts and brain. These tests are a monumental and instrumental part of psychology as a whole, helping psychologists create a more complete picture of each individual. Who knows? Maybe Gandalf helped make the Rorschach test because his personality test showed him to be an innovative and creative wizard. Thank you.